So John, here you are, you're born and raised in Atlanta. You're an Atlanta guy, this is your hometown, and you've lived a life of anonymity for the most part. And all of a sudden within the last 100 days, maybe 120 days, like a light switch, you have become an A-level an A-level celebrity in this town. How difficult has that been for you?
Well, it's not really about me. It's about this community at this moment in time. It's about the volunteers, more than 11,000 of them, who have been knocking on doors and making phone calls for months, so much of it led by women in this community and folks from across the political spectrum, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, who are committed to sending some fresh leadership to Washington and making a difference.
When you were a kid growing up, could you have imagined that one day you would see yourself being described on Atlanta TV as dangerous, and you would probably laugh about it?
Well, you know, politics has become ugly. There's so much partisanship out there. But I think this campaign is bringing people together by focusing on core values, by focusing on our local economic development. That's why the campaign has built a coalition that goes beyond merely a political party.
What do you think is the #1 issue in the 6th District as you journey around?
Well, I think that we're united in the desire for greater economic opportunity to attract more jobs, investment to this area, more capital and clients for our businesses. And I think that the need for access to affordable health care unites people as well, that folks with pre-existing conditions shouldn't face price discrimination, that women should be able to access medical services when and where they see fit.
On the subject of health care, how are premiums going to be kept down? It seems to be a vexing issue in Washington, and for that matter around the country. Everybody seems to have an ambiguous way that they would keep down premiums, but the hard, cold, stark reality is that has not been the case, that nobody really seems to have an answer for that.
Well, I'm not sure it has to be that hard or that mysterious if policymakers would come together and focus on solutions by introducing more competition into the insurance market, by allowing Georgians, for example, to shop plans across state lines. Like in any market, more choice will drive down prices and drive up quality.
And that pretty much is a Republican idea. Are you going to be able to get fellow Democrats that are going to sign on board as far as
I think it's an idea around which we can find a lot of common ground. More competition in the marketplace, lower premiums, higher quality of care. But what career politicians in Congress have decided to do instead is to focus on partisan objectives rather than focus on the public interest.
You've talked a lot about being an independent, but it's very hard to be an independent in Washington these days. They are a very rare species, if they can be found at all. Everybody is an ideologue, whether it's the left or the right. You have so much money that's coming in to this race from out of Georgia. Is it possible to go to Washington and say, yes, I will have independence, yet Congress certainly just doesn't see many of those kinds?
Well, Congress is full of career politicians who have become creatures of the system, who are mired in gridlock. My campaign is powered by grassroots, small dollar fundraising. The average contribution to my campaign is less than $50. And that will afford me the kind of independence to look exclusively at policy on the merits. Does a proposal serve the interests of this community? If it does, I'll support it. If it doesn't serve the interests of the community, then I'll seek to amend it so it does. And if ultimately it gets to the floor and it's not right for the 6th District, I'll oppose it.
Do you feel like you're running against Donald Trump as much as Karen Handel right now?
No, I don't think I'm running against anyone so much as I'm running for a set of ideas and a set of values that unite people here in Metro Atlanta. I think we have more in common than partisan political operatives in D.C. Or the national news media would have us believe.
But your supporters do not like Donald Trump. I mean, I don't think you have to be David Gergen to understand how much those on the left, those who vote Democratic, do not like Donald Trump. Do you believe Donald Trump to be competent?
Well, there are certainly folks in this community who have deep concerns about the direction of things in Washington right now and the direction that the administration is taking us, the level of disarray, the level of gridlock. But what's uniting people here in Georgia is a desire for fresh leadership that can break through that gridlock, that can be focused on achieving things for this community.
Let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump, and he wants the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15% to help small business. Current House plan is at 20%. Where do you stand on that? What do you think works?
If we can achieve a reduction in corporate income tax rates for small and medium-sized businesses, I think that would be a big win for our community here in Georgia.
How would you work with a Republican majority? That's a very simple question, but very complex in practical application. How do you get the GOP to do business with you as a Democrat?
Well, whether it's infrastructure or tax reform or immigration reform, it's about reaching out, respectfully, firmly, in a principled way, and identifying areas for common ground, building relationships to get things done. When I was a congressional aide, I worked with Republican staff and Republican offices all the time to get things done. It can be done, but it requires fresh leadership. And if we send another career politician to Congress, we're going to get more of the same gridlock.
If you win on June 20th, you immediately start campaigning again. That's just how the system is set. It's a combination of governing and campaigning. It seems as though both of those are sort of like hitting and fielding in baseball. It is a skill set that you have to develop. Do you believe that you can create some sort of base, if you're victorious, where you would be able to withstand any kind of Republican challenge, and they will put somebody else, if you're victorious, 2 years later? How much of a challenge is that for you, and do you begin to have a master plan toward being a successful congressperson in this district?
Well, look, I grew up in this community, and I know that it's not a particularly partisan or ideological one. It's a community that wants decent, effective, energetic representation that gets things done. I'll go to Washington focused on getting things done, not getting mired in the gridlock that so many career politicians succumb to. And I believe that by focusing on achieving results, working across the aisle to achieve results, delivering great constituent service, being an ambassador for the business community here in Georgia, that I'll demonstrate to the people of this community my effectiveness.
In your TV ads, you talk about tech jobs and creating jobs here, but there are a lot of people that are not highly educated, a lot of people that do not translate toward technology jobs, that they are people that will never be part of this new economy. How do you help them?
Well, I push back a little bit on the idea that there are people who would never be part of this new economy. One of the things that I've talked about is attacking waste in the federal budget so we can set the right priorities. And one of those priorities has to be education, and that has to include retraining, technical education at our community and tech schools so that folks who need to make a transition mid-career can do so.
What do you think best distinguishes you from Karen Handel?
Well, I think a fresh perspective. With all due respect to Secretary Handel, she's run 6 different times for 5 different offices. She's a partisan politician. I have experience as a congressional aide, as a small business owner, and the fresh perspective and the independence necessary to break through the gridlock and get things done.
So many questions now are of a national bent as opposed to local. If you were running for Congress maybe 20 years ago, you would get a handful of questions about national politics or the situation in the White House involving potential Russian involvement in the election of 2016. How do you view an independent counsel, and is it possible for a counsel to be independent given the fact that Congress and the majority in all probability would be the ones that would appoint a special investigator or counselor?
Well, here's what we know. The U.S. intelligence community has publicly stated that Russian intelligence services sought to interfere in the U.S. election, that they did so on orders of Vladimir Putin. That is unacceptable. That requires not just a tough and firm response from the United States, but also a full, independent, transparent investigation that's above partisanship. And I look at someone like Senator John McCain, an experienced Republican legislator who for months has been calling for such an independent investigation. I think we can find bipartisan common ground to call for a full investigation that gets us to the truth. The quality of that investigation will depend upon the independence and credibility of the person appointed to carry it out, and I have confidence in Director Mueller.
You were a 17-year-old at Paideia, and you're reading a book about Congressman John Lewis, and you were moved by his life. You were able to become an intern with him. Are there anybody else in politics in this state, as you were growing up, that you admired and you thought, I like what they represent, I would like to be a little like this person?
Well, I think that Georgia has a long history of independent-minded leadership in Congress that's delivered results for this district. I mean, the 6th district was represented by Carl Vinson more than half a century ago. We've had legislators like Sam Nunn. I think Johnny Isakson has had a reputation for independence. I think that Roy Barnes is the kind of Democrat who's been able to build a broad coalition by focusing on things that bring people together and getting things done. But I think we've lost touch a bit with that tradition. As politics has become more partisan, more ideological, there's less of a focus on achieving results by working together. And there's so much divisiveness, so much fanning of the flames of anger at one another. I want to bring a fresh perspective to try to find that common ground and get things done.
You're a young person who has had so much written on you in so many publications around the country that follow politics, whether it's the New Yorker or Politico or The Hill or any of these kinds of things. And they always talk about what the future holds for you. Do you have a master plan that everybody believes that Jon Ossoff is, you know, very carefully choreographing his future in American politics?
Not at all. I'm a small business owner. I run a firm that specializes in investigating organized crime, political corruption, and war crimes, selling that journalistic content to television broadcasters all over the world, and that's been the most rewarding work in my life so far. And I had no plans to get back into politics anytime soon until November. But I think what we learned in November is how little faith there is in American politics right now, how little faith there is in our elected representatives and our institutions. I want to apply my experience and bring a fresh perspective to try to rebuild some of that faith and get things done for Georgia.
What did you learn working with Hank Johnson?
Well, the most inspiring part of that work was working with the men and women in uniform and our veterans here in Georgia, who too often don't get the respect and responsiveness they need, either from the Department of Defense's bureaucracy or from the VA. And I'd like to be the most effective, responsive representative for those who serve our country, who are from the state.
I live in the 5th District, and I have neighbors to the left of me and to the right of me that have Jon Ossoff signs in their front yard. And I see that all over the 5th District. It's everywhere. Your signs, it is as though you are running in the 5th District. Does that help you, or does that hurt you in the 6th District to have that sort of outside district support that maybe some might resent in the 6th District?
Well, come and take a drive with me and my team in the 6th District, and I think you'll see a lot more Jon Ossoff signs.
So here we are, less than a month. Any kind of change in strategy as it sort of takes a different shape and form here in the weeks ahead?
From the very beginning of this campaign, I've been focused on local economic development, access to affordable health care, and shared values in this community that bring people together. I've been reaching out to voters across the political spectrum, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, humbly and with respect, and making the case that even if we don't agree on everything, I'll deliver energetic, effective representation. That's the message that I'm still sending. That's what I want to do for this community. Right now, we're working on getting out the vote. Of course, early voting is open, and June 20th is right around the corner.